has legacy.
Good morning. Welcome back to another week of Dubai Works Business Podcast. This week we have the pleasure of being joined by Ravichandra. He is an international career path strategist and executive coach involved in organizational psychologist and the co-founder of Kompass Consultancy, which is celebrating 7 years in business this month. For 20 years, Gaj has worked in leading organizations with individuals, sporting companies, business schools, as well to enhance productivity and accelerate growth. As a registered psychologist, Gaj leans on the psychology training to deliver the most effective, evidence-based solutions to his clients. And his company, Kompass Consultancy, specializes in enabling performance excellence, offering executive coaching, mental toughness, which we'll delve into, performance coaching, career transition, which is very relevant at the moment for many people, and coaching as well, strategic career road mapping and mindset coaching. Kompass are headquartered in Dubai, but they also have a presence in UK, Europe, Middle East, and Australia, where Gaj is joining us from this morning, or I should say this evening. What time is it there?
Yeah, late afternoon, evening. That's right. Thanks, Rich. How are you, mate?
Very good. Thanks for joining us. You're in Sydney?
That's right. I am. Yeah.
And you've been there since March, I think.
That's right. Since mid-March. So we managed to get back around mid-March, and obviously it's been very challenging to get back and to have consistent flights from different providers. So I think I'm looking to get back pretty soon. I'm missing the place. I'm missing Dubai.
Oh, really? What do you miss about Dubai? What does Dubai have that Sydney doesn't?
Yeah, it's a good question. There is something about Dubai. I mean, we got there in 2008, right? A few months before the world started really having these massive impacts with the financial crisis, and there was something about Dubai in terms of its limitless mindset. Right? The fact that you can say, we're going to do this and actually do it is very different to most developed economies or developing economies, right? And I think if you look at Australia, for example, we've been trying to build a second runway in our international airports for about 30 years. Hasn't happened. Right? Do you think that would ever happen in a place like Dubai?
That's interesting, yeah. They have that issues, I think, in Dublin and in Heathrow. They had many issues with an extra terminal. There's so much red tape. I think it's you often hear of it in construction, like in developed cities. It's so hard to get projects off the ground, and you can do it so easily in Dubai. That kind of mindset. You mentioned that's your family. You've two sort of almost teenage daughters as well, and they're with you in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going through that fabulous phase, mate, of having the pre-teens and the teens.
Yeah.
Look, it's a delightful thing. You can read as many books as you like on the topic, right? But when you actually live through that process, you want to be there to support them. And being girls, for me, it's a very foreign concept, right? As a father, to kind of understand what it means to be a girl growing up.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a massive learning for me, right? And so that's been really interesting.
Yeah, and I'm sure your psychology comes into use as well when you're wearing your daughters. I'm sure they're masters at it as well.
They're better at it than me. But I think psychology is not allowed to be practiced at home, I've been told.
Okay. But yeah, so tell us, 7 years in business with Kompass, you obviously kind of had a good career in consultancy before that. And what kind of led you to setting it up, and what was the kind of gap in the market at the time?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the things that we were really keen on from the very beginning was to start to have ownership, right, over the direction that we wanted to help people in. And I think, finding like-minded people, that kind of shared that vision with you is really hard to find. I mean, I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, over the years, and one of the things I find, Rich, is that they really struggle to find people who share that common sort of purpose or goal. You've interviewed lots of people, right, on this show, who've started a business, who've kind of built something. And, one of my old mentors used to tell me, you can outsource for pretty much anything except values. And so you need to get that part right. And if you don't get that part right, you get problems. And, those problems, you start to see the cracks, right? Developing, particularly when there's pressure and stress, which tends to happen as you're growing a business. And particularly as we've tried to grow it internationally, that has been, one of the fundamental things to hold us together, right? So it's interesting.
It's basically a consultancy company that does all the things I kind of mentioned in the intro, but based on what you mentioned there, you really touch on the core kind of setup and structure of a company from a value proposition.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have kind of three main parts of our business. We have a performance consultancy piece. How do we get the maximum performance for people as individuals, as teams, as organizations? We have a leadership piece. So we look at, how do we develop better leaders? And then we have a careers part of our business, right? And so across all those three areas, the business is very passionate about helping people across those three dimensions. And so that might be in sporting teams. So we've helped, different sporting teams, institutions around the world, individuals as well as teams, to perform at a higher level. We've worked with, Fortune 500 companies. We've been very fortunate to kind of do that. And also then sort of leading business schools. So, whether it's the INSEADs or, Harvard Education or Hult Ashridge, we've been very lucky to kind of work with those institutions to kind of manage their talent, whether they're studying executive MBAs or in fact even, individual senior leaders within those companies, right, to get the maximum performance that they can.
So what are the sort of principles that you take into your offering and your product? So what have you learned over time and from your background that are really important to you and kind of comes through on all your offerings?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to, when we hear this word coach, it's really funny. Everyone is a coach these days, right? Everyone's claiming to be a coach and to be able to, provide support to people. And I think there are some wonderful programs out there that allow you to be able to have the knowledge to do that. And that is based around science, right? It's not a, it's something that you can measure typically. So what we normally do is we go in and we have some sort of diagnostic, some sort of tool, questionnaire that measures where is this person right now, right? On a number of dimensions. It could be their mental toughness and resilience. It could be about other elements of their personality, their leadership. And then we kind of, put together, I guess, a bit of an intervention, right? Over a course of 3, 6 months, 12 months, that allows them to start to develop not only their areas of weakness that they might have, but to even strengthen their strengths, right? I guess if you and I think about it, Richard, one of the key things that, I tend to find is that when you go through these kind of assessments, people start to focus so much on their weaknesses and their development areas, they forget that the thing that brought them there is actually their strengths, right? So that's your unique sort of value. We need to bring our weaknesses up, but at the same time, we need to develop the things that have actually, differentiated us from most other people. And so it's working on those things in combination, that can be really powerful. Right?
So what do you think, Gaj, that there's enough awareness or acceptance of sort of career development and personal development? Do you think it varies by country, by sector? I remember just a small anecdote personally. I remember I worked in a few small companies, and when I joined a big company in London, there was so much focus on people and culture, and the courses they put me on really helped me in language and communication and in development. And it was manager level, it wasn't leadership level, and that was a wake-up call. I remember being in a room with 20 other people, and we were learning about resolving conflict. And all my learnings about, and you might, in your involvement in sports, you might recognize this, but all my learnings about conflict and people management were from football managers' books and Alex Ferguson kicking boots at David Beckham and stuff like that. And I would argue so strongly that was the right approach, because that's what a 25-year-old self believed, that's how you manage people. And I was convinced through this provided by the company that there's different ways to do it. and that really it helped me in the future. And then I remember being at a certain level over here, a sort of almost MD level, and being out of my depth and wanting career coaching, and asking the CEO for asking for support. And I was told that there wasn't belief in career coaching. The company didn't necessarily believe in it, that you can do it on the job or you can do it with your peers. And I found that an awareness piece, like clearly there's expertise that can help, like in anything in learning and education, whether it's books or whether it's people, and there's different techniques and there's things different work for different people. But why have you come across that? Why would people not think it works?
Yeah, look, that's a fully loaded question. It's awesome. I think there's probably a number of things around that. Sometimes they've just had a really bad experience, right? Going down that path of getting some career coaching. And perhaps it hasn't been structured, right, and organized. Perhaps it's been unclear about where you're actually going, right? One of the big areas that we find is a major problem is actually trying to understand your target or your goal, right? So in career coaching, you need to have some sort of endpoint to some extent, right? Or some sort of short-term, medium-term, long-term goals that you would set. Now, what's really interesting that's kind of taking place in the world of career coaching is shifting so quickly. When you look at jobs nowadays, we're moving into this kind of gig economy, where people are working on multiple projects and doing all these kind of things. We're actually then shifting into this fractional employment, which is then much about...
heard for the first time this week. Yeah, can you explain?
Really?
Yeah. Fractional CMOs and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So the idea is that, obviously there could be people, and this is like, it's a bit shocking actually when you kind of think about this from our perspective in today's sort of job market. But there will be a time in the not so distant future where we are going to be working perhaps multiple part-time jobs, potentially for competitive companies, right? Now, the idea that you could potentially go and work for one software company and then work for its competitor half the time each week is a little bit foreign at the moment, right? But that's where the world of work is going. So this sense of having permanency, right, in our jobs, we're going to start to see over the next 10 years the word permanent being dropped, right? Now, this is a big shift in the way that we think, because I think for a lot of us, we still like the fact that there is security and stability, right, in a job that we hold. Now, what does this mean from a career perspective? And, if you're going down the path of career coaching, it means your personal brand has to be developed, right, from a career perspective. So, and I've got, one of our business partners, our sort of a global sort of expert, a guy called Peter Hill. He's known as the career doctor. We created this Kickstarter series with him, and he talks about forget job security, right? No one wants to talk about job security anymore. We've got to start talking about career security, right? So how do you, Richard, as an individual, manage your career, not just worry about your current job or the next job, right? That's a transactional kind of process, right? So we're kind of shifting to what does my brand look like? How am I going to sell myself in a way that kind of makes sense to organizations or to people, right? How do I use social media? I don't need to tell you about social media. You've got that down pat, right? But how do you sell on social media your skills and capabilities, and how do you connect, right? And I think that is a massive skill set that a lot of us don't have right now. And, we need to learn how to do this. So if there are programs out there that teach you how to connect socially, how you brand yourself, as an asset, right? I mean, marketing 101, right? Features and benefits. If you go and ask anybody, right, what are the features and benefits of you as a skill set or an asset to a company? Most people will struggle to articulate that, right? And what's kind of important about that is saying, well, firstly, do I have that self-awareness about what makes me so special and unique, right? And, we talk about this in some of our programs, that self-awareness leads to articulation, right? If you have that self-awareness, you spent that time understanding yourself, you can then talk about it with somebody, right?
Mm.
And so that's really important to have that. Yeah.
Do you think there's a difference between, say, fractional or freelance, or an evolution of that, and permanent? Do you think there, obviously there still will be some permanent work, and then there's some freelance, and do you think it's a choice? Do you think we have to be aware of both, under the guise of how we manage our career? Should we manage our career one way for permanency and one way for fractional freelance?
Yeah, it's a good question, because it actually implies that there could be some sort of transition point, right, over time, that we're going to get to. So if we assume that there's going to be some roles that will be permanent, that are going to be required all the time, and let's take an example. Some of the essential services you might find, for example, doctors in hospitals. There's going to be an element of permanency to that. Having said that, most doctors work on contract, right? The enterprise agreements, around the world with most doctors is 2 or 3 years, for example. And so therefore you might tend to find that that's also there, but there's some permanency to some extent. Definitely in terms of the freelance perspective, we're seeing that already. I mean, there's stats coming out from the World Economic Forum saying, by over the next 5 to 10 years, 50% of people in the US will be self-employed, right? That's a massive shift in how people need to brand themselves. And that's only going to move across into other countries, and like the UAE. So if we think about what does that mean for people in Dubai? What does it mean for the government in Dubai? This talk of having, part-time visas, of having, visas for entrepreneurs, right, to kind of set up companies and to sell themselves, is going to become even more important over the next 5 to 10 years. That's going to be critical, because a lot of companies might not invest in people on the ground. They might say, actually, you know what, we can get this done from someone in Canada who's going to offer this service, right? And so that world is going to look a little bit different. Which is interesting.
If we take those kind of just 2 points out of that, firstly on the freelancer, there's emerging technologies and software, kind of the evolution of LinkedIn or the CV, and we use a lot one called Upwork, and we were seeing such value in it that we've decided not just to call it Upwork or freelance, but to actually build it as an extension of an arm of our company, and our company always picks Roman terms. So we have Augustus is the name, and then we've got Odium, our content studio, Sensor, our data analytics platform, and then we said, well, what's something about an army, or what's something to do with? So we've called this Legio, and it's early days, but the idea is to recognize what you were talking about and to kind of have the right framework around that, and not just to kind of see it as a project on Upwork that's a transaction and a margin, but how are you working with these very crucial, talented, skilled freelancers in all parts of the world, and how do we recognize that that's part of our future, and to build other structure around it? And just before I ask another question on that, the first technical bit is, when you're saying personal development, I see some people on this platform who are very good at, these platforms are based on reviews and recommendations and doing the work as you said you were. How do you advise people to manage that type of a LinkedIn or a CV in this age, like beyond sort of social media, like, getting references every job and all this sort of stuff?
Yeah, so this is going to be, sometimes out of the comfort zone of a lot of people, right? To actually go back and to make these requests, be proactive, to ask for references. Exactly. Now, obviously, LinkedIn provides an opportunity.
I don't think I would have been good at that, Raj. I really don't.
Same. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, look, it's funny. It's ironic, actually, because 90% of our business over the last 7 years has grown through that referral process, right? We probably only in the last 12 months have really focused a lot on that sort of marketing growth and organic growth through marketing. And I think that's something that, us as, sort of technical specialists might have to develop, a sort of quasi skill set around, right? It's not something we taught at university or, taught at any of these kind of institutions. And so part of that is around being proactive, definitely. You're going to have to ask. The other is then realizing that, what do you do with this information? Okay, you've got these recommendations, you've got this data. How do you create a story around that to then be able to pass on to other people? Is it through case studies? Is it through mapping the industry that you've worked in and then going to those competitors in that industry, to that client, and saying, hey, guess what I just did, right? It's that kind of proactivity and drive that is going to make a massive difference to people. The world of sitting back and waiting, right, for work to come to you is gone. That is just not going to happen. And I was listening to these social media sort of podcasts saying, if you don't have a social media presence in the next 2 or 3 years, you're virtually not going to exist in that world. And that horrified me, right? I'm kind of listening to this, and someone who's not from that world, it was eye-opening, right? To understand that that's where we're going to get a lot of our knowledge and content from, right?
Yeah.
So that is a big shift. And so learning to understand how social media operates, how do we use our referral schemes? How do we get recommendations proactively? That's going to be massively powerful.
Yeah, interesting. When people realize that it's so important, they can focus on it. And I think it's good for you to put it into context like that. It's not just about copying and pasting a CV onto LinkedIn and leaving it there. There's a lot more you can do. And it's especially relevant in this day and age. Let's talk a little bit more in a second about Kickstarter series, but just one more question around that, about the gig economy and the regulation around it. There's a lot of talk about, Uber, for example, and whether their drivers should be employees and the benefits and welfare and things like that. But actually we see this not just, that's kind of the typical example, but it's happening in all sorts of freelancer spaces, and even in more glorified things like the writing platform Substack and things like that. But actually these technical platforms who are providing a place for people to provide services are realizing that they need to take the role in some respect of the employer. How do you kind of view that space? Is that kind of more murky water to navigate for people's careers?
Yeah, it is a challenge, and one of the things that there are a lot of these platforms starting to come up, and part of trying to understand which platforms should I be registering on and working through, a lot of that comes through referrals, right? It comes through your friends, it comes through people you trust. So ensuring that you are talking to people about how they're potentially winning work. If you're, for example, permanently employed right now and you're hiring contractors, talking to them to understand where are they getting their opportunities from, right? What kind of platforms are working at the moment? It's starting to have those kinds of conversations because the world is shifting. Now, COVID has obviously had a massive impact on this, and it has shifted the landscape significantly and accelerated, as we all know, certain industries and certain ways of thinking. And this is one of those ways of thinking. It has forced us to kind of be a little bit more proactive in how we manage our careers, because if we think about an employer or an organization as a bit of a machine, right? The machine has needs. It has stakeholders that has to feed. And the machine needs to operate in a way that where the stakeholder is not being fed, it then needs to adjust. It needs to change. It needs to restructure. It needs to fundamentally shift the way that it operates. And so that's only normal, right? And I think sometimes we've placed this huge expectation on these big machines to kind of give us that stability and security, right? And I think what people are finding now is that we cannot rely on that. That is, absolutely, right? You got to rely on yourself. And it's that self-reliance, which means, what is my brand, personal brand? Because if I'm going to push this out there now, and personal brand has always been important. It's been important in permanent roles, right? How do people get promoted? And the amount of people we talk to, Richard, who say, can't believe that person got promoted. They do half the work that I do, right? And they still manage to get the promotion, right? That's linked to something, right? There's a reason why they've done that. So that's always been there.
Interesting. So you kind of really think that the onus is on the person and the individual and that personal brand and that personal economy. and that they should be looking after their health insurance and their taxes and their legal rights and protect themselves, really.
Yeah, absolutely. That is going to be absolutely vital. And I think the more independent we can become and self-reliant we can become, it starts to open up the opportunities to think more broadly, right, about where you take your skills. Actually, no longer now I can base myself in Dubai, but I could be operating and delivering services across the GCC virtually, into North America, into Australia. That's all possible, right? And it's becoming almost standard and expected now that we might be doing that more and more often. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, Dubai is a good kind of touch space for that as well. It's a global hub. But just kind of the Kickstarter series you mentioned that you did with a partner, an online course to help people kind of get back to work. How do you go about that? And how have you seen the sort of the climate lately with people transitioning jobs and the uncertainty? Is there a lot of do people need a lot of talking and help at the moment?
It's massive. I mean, I've never seen anything like this in the 20 years that I've been working. And, as partners, we have actually lifted our own level of pro bono work that we provide to 30 hours a month. So 1 hour a day that we provide a free sort of consultation, right, to people around this. People either in difficult, dire situations can't afford to get career coaching and support. And we have upped that service. Now, because of that, what we decided to do, Richard, was actually to create a virtual platform or product that would actually allow people from anywhere in the world to access about 50 years of research, right, and career coaching, and to be able to do that. So you don't have to go and attend a business school, right, and do an MBA to kind of get access to it. It can be done in the comfort of your own home. 4 hours of content, from sample CVs and interview skills through to the self-assessment, to turning interviews into job offers, to salary negotiation, the entire spectrum of what you would typically expect. And we've made that available, right? And, what's been more fascinating is actually we've been speaking to a couple of governments in the last week. It was only launched 2 weeks ago. And, we thought we'd put it online, make it available to the general public. And a couple of governments have come to us and said, well, we have 120,000 graduates who can't find jobs. Right? Could we use this product, to kind of support people through this? And the answer is absolutely yes. Right? And that's the exciting part. So, I have this little chart that sits on my board here. That's a countdown, right? And it's gone from 1 to 1 million. And our private goal, it's not private anymore, is actually to get to 1 million people that have used this product by the end of this year.
Oh, wow. That's a short time frame. But yeah.
It's a short time frame, right? We are dead serious about having as many people as possible access this platform, because we know now is the time. Now is the time when people need this support, when they are potentially lost, right? And they don't know what to do. And they need a strategy and a plan on how to find that next opportunity, right?
So it's a free program they can access?
It's not free. It's about $200, and it's about sort of 8 modules, 4 hours of content. It's typically around $2,500 that we would normally package. We've dropped the price by less than 90% to make it accessible to people. And we've tried to do that because we know that there is a lot of value there, and these tools you can use for the rest of your life. Right. So, we felt it was the right time to kind of do this.
No, I was going to say that, I've also experienced, like everyone has, a change in the kind of job landscape, like whether it's furlough, whether it's people unemployed, people having to move country, and then the uncertainty and the kind of human anxiety, the elements that kind of crop up as well. But I think it does stand out when people do come for an interview, or when people do talk to you, the ones that have prepared and have, we go back to the point about knowledge and educating yourself. You can use this time to improve yourself. And I think it's fascinating that for a small investment, you can become better at 4 or 5 crucial things that can help your career in the future. So it's great that you put that online.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this has been tried and tested with over 10,000 people across 140 countries in 5 continents. So we know this works. We've seen it work so many times. So it's exciting. And I think it's not just us, right? I mean, so many of the organizations have had to pivot and kind of think about how can they take their knowledge and their skills and their experiences and create something that's going to help the community, right? And not just their local community. Now you've got access to a global community, which is amazing. So we've had people from different countries, going through the process of kind of understanding more about themselves and understanding what does it mean to have a plan when you're looking for a job, which is amazing.
Yeah. Do you think, I just keep thinking of something you said a minute ago, the kind of how to turn the interview into a job offer. Is that is that psychological? Is that an element of negotiation and language? And can you give away some of the secrets?
Absolutely. Won't give away too much. I'll get slapped on the wrist. But I think one of the key things is really about planting the seeds all the way through the job process, right?
Okay.
So imagine you're at interview stage. You might have had 2 or 3 interviews, different people within the organization. Some of these consulting companies are having up to 10 or 11 interviews with different people. And you're at this point, you're at the cusp, right? And you've got this point where someone needs to make a decision, right, to give you an offer in writing, right? And what's going to sway that person, right? And a lot of it is around what's sitting between their ears, right? Do they feel that you can do the job? You have the knowledge, skills, and abilities. Do they feel that you're going to have the right, what we call can do, will fit, right? Can you do the job? Will you do the job? Do you have the motivation, the drive, the passion, the energy, right? And then will you fit into the culture, the values of that team and the organization, right? And if you have laced all the way through that journey, that process, all the right seeds, right? And you answer those 3 questions and it's clear in the minds of that person who has to make that decision, more than likely you're going to get an offer letter, right? And so you have to do that clearer than everybody else that's part of that journey, right? And that's typically through how you tell a story, how you relay the right skills and knowledge, right? And the psychology you talk about, Richard, absolutely, right? People like people who are similar to themselves in some way, right? So if we use the biases that we have, if you stand there and you look at yourself in the mirror and say, nah, I don't think I want to offer you that job, it's hard to say that to yourself, right? So, if you find some commonalities there, it's really powerful way of creating a connection with people, right, through that process.
Yeah.
I don't want to give away too much away, but there's some ideas.
No, it's great. I've been consuming a lot of audiobooks lately, and I think I haven't done a lot of online courses. I think it's interesting for people that they can access this material in that way with a small investment. I just think it's an interesting concept. We talk about there are obviously successful platforms, Udemy or a few others, and that's changing education. But it's just interesting in learning, and I think we're talking about recruitment, but or getting a job offer. But if there's any area in people's career that they think they can improve, there's probably a way to improve through digital learning. For example, I thought I needed to improve on negotiations, so I listened to a few books on that. And it's just fascinating what you can learn. And I think I wasn't asking that question around myself getting a job, but I just wondered, like, so many people come in for an interview and they don't impress enough for the next round. And there's this this kind of like you said, they can impress as individuals or they can have the skills, but they also need to be quite strategic, and they're there for a purpose. There's a transactional element to this. They need a job offer, and to believe in themselves as well, I think is really important.
That's critical. That's that self-confidence, right? That kind of shines through. I mean, there's all those statistics that tell you some of the difference between men and women on that, right? So you look at, for example, if you have a job ad that's placed in the Gulf News or wherever it might be, a woman looking at that job, they need to meet 99% of that criteria before they apply. a man will look at it and say, typically, I can do 50% of that. I'm pretty good to go,
Yeah.
right? And it's that level of confidence sometimes that is, just inherent in our communities, in our society. And, it's backing yourself, right? To be able to do that, to know that you can learn quickly, that you can show how your skills are transferable from one company to another or one industry to another, right?
Yeah.
And it's spending that time up front to show that, which is important.
So being sort of fractional or freelance or even out of work, like how do you advise people and suffering from anxiety or pressure of bills and when will the next job come, whether it's project based or full time? What are there any things that you would suggest to people to cope with it? Like I'm thinking at one point in my career about 10 years ago, I was between jobs and I just found routine very difficult. I was going for loads of interviews, but I just didn't feel 100%. I was stressed. I was staying awake at night, and I wasn't getting up as early. And I think that's another challenge, right? That sort of internal mindset. Like, are there any things that you would advise people?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a number of models out there that are really powerful, right? And if you were to go and see a therapist, right, and lie on a couch and have a conversation with them, they would use something called cognitive behavior therapy sometimes, right? So the idea is that in your mind, your thoughts affect your feelings and your feelings affect your behavior, right? So the only thing you can control in that cycle are your thoughts. So everything starts and stops with your thoughts. So the conversation you have with yourself sometimes can be really negative, right? I'm not going to apply for that job. Google's never going to want to have someone like me, or McKinsey wouldn't be interested in my skill set, or Noon is not going to find my skills relevant, for what they're looking for. And it automatically impedes our ability to be able to go for something, right? Or to question why we couldn't make that work, right? So those thoughts kind of help us. And there is something in that sort of mental toughness, resilience piece called controlling the controllables, right? It comes out of a sports psychology term. It was actually from one of the psychologists who helped the Poms beat the Aussies in cricket to regain the Ashes, right, a while ago. And what he kind of went through with the team was to say, look, there are lots of things out of our control, right? The spread of the pandemic is one of them. The economy, we can't control. Government regulation, we can't control. The weather, we can't control. But we can control what we do today, right? And, one of the things we talk about in the Kickstarter series is actually setting some mini goals for yourself. So we have a spreadsheet that people download, and it tells you how many people are you going to contact each day? How many resumes how many job ads are you going to sort of look at, strategically and kind of apply for? And it's kind of working on a day-by-day basis, sometimes an hour-by-hour basis, right? What can I do now, right? What's in my control that's going to make a difference, right? And it's these kind of baby steps that help build a momentum in a positive way. I find also support, Richard, is kind of critical, right? So surround yourself with good people who aren't sucking energy from you, that actually give you energy, right? That makes a massive difference. And, I speak to people who've lost their jobs, almost daily. And one of the fundamental differences that I find in people who are successful at finding a job quickly and those who aren't is the discipline that they demonstrate, right? So the more structured you are, the more targeted you are, the more likely it is that you are working towards something in an organized fashion, right? That gives you hope and that gives you a sense of comfort, right? Yeah. And so you want to reduce the instability and insecurity there.
Yeah, I think lots of interesting points there. I think a lot of people will relate to it. Thank you for sharing. I think planting little seeds like that, it mightn't have an impact today, but over time, if you are disciplined, you'll see fruition. And you touched on kind of another area we wanted to talk about, which is mental toughness. And let's talk a little bit about leadership. Sometimes phrases and statements are abstract, or they're just taken for granted, or that person has great mental strength. What do you think that means? Like, how would you define someone with great mental strength in a career perspective?
Biceps in the brain, right? And, you know, I kind of partially joke around that. I think mental toughness is one of these things where we think it's like a macho concept, right? That you got to be hard nosed, that you shouldn't have emotion, right? That you just got to deal with stuff and just get on with it, right? And that is an extreme version of mental toughness, right? To kind of do those things. But typically, the model that we use is a model that was created by an independent body called AQR, right, over in the UK. And they talk about four things: commitment, confidence, challenge, and control, right? So does the person commit to things, right? If you're going through a really tough time, we need to find ways of setting some goals and being able to commit to those goals and ensuring that we put in more effort than is required, right, to do that. Overcoming challenges, right, is a massive thing. So what are the obstacles that I'm going to face, right? And what is the mindset that I need to have to make sure that I'm going to overcome those obstacles? And what support do I need around me, right, to be able to achieve that, right? Confidence. So we talked a little bit about confidence before, believing in yourself. And there are kind of two kinds of confidence. Confidence in your abilities, right? Do I have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do the job? And then self-confidence, right? So this is about or interpersonal confidence. This is about standing up for what you believe, right? And, you know, whether it's in a group environment or in a small team, try to decide what you are going to stand for. Now, that is part of your personal brand as well, right? What makes you unique as a value proposition. And the final one is around control, emotional control. You know, when things are going really badly for you and you feel like you're just not getting a win, right? Do you resort to that, staying in that frustration? And it's okay to be sad and frustrated, right? That's all normal. It's all human. But we shouldn't choose to stay there, right? We need to kind of pick ourselves up and kind of go above the line, right? And kind of choose to say, well, okay, here's a problem. What's the opportunity? Right? That this kind of presents for us. So it's those kind of things that kind of help us. And those kind of four areas that can be really powerful.
I think it's a great analogy, and again, thank you for sharing. But the four examples are the areas. The mental biceps in the brain is interesting because, you know, the default is, oh, that person's tough because they're naturally, like, it's what's the word, innate, or, you know, born with mental strength. But actually, the biceps analogy is that, you know, what do you do to grow your biceps? Okay, you need to lift weights, but also it's nutrition, it's lifestyle, it's consistency with going to the gym. And similarly with biceps in the brain, you can have meditation, you can have therapy, you can have quiet time, you can have knowledge, you can read books, you can educate yourself with the right information and then the right food, and it all relates. And I think that's really interesting. I can relate to it a lot, and I think in terms of sports and what people do, you know, you see people who win individual sports or team sports, and they say they have great mental strength, but actually, you know, they might have lost many times, and it's by the brain, the mental strength is getting stronger by learning from those experiences. So it's a good analogy for the workplace as well. And of course, I think understanding your patterns and emotions is such a crucial learning for people. What you explained, and you do it in a nice kind of easy to understand way, but there's a lot of depth to that. Like, how can you do that? Obviously, that's not covered in a Kickstarter course. So how can you kind of work with people? Do you work in group levels or individuals, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we touch upon it in Kickstarter as a mindset that people need to have, right, as you're going into a job search process. Because, you know, typically, you know, we talk to lots of people and they say, oh, I applied for 100 jobs on LinkedIn and I got one response back, right? Well, clearly that strategy may not be working for you. So that demoralizes people and they feel like their mental toughness gets dropped, right, as a result of that. So we need to try some new strategies and different approaches. So in a way, you know, going back to your question, Richard, some of the ways in which people can kind of develop this, right, is really focusing on what is in their control and what can they do to bring some of the experiences from the past, right, some of the achievements that they've had, and remember what were those components, right, that they kind of had as well. You know, learning from past experience is great. Taking risks, right? Trying new things is a massive way. So we spend time individually, with people, with teams, and with actually wider organizations as well, right? To do this. A couple of years ago, we were asked to work on a project where we had some pretty mentally tough people in a boardroom, and the COO jumped across the boardroom in this meeting and punched the CFO in the face.
Wow.
Right? And you can imagine these are extreme, highly ambitious, A-type individuals, all being put into a room trying to decide on the strategy of this organization. It was a bank, right?
Wow.
Now, when things like that happen, typically you need external support to come in and to have an objective kind of approach, right, to how people work. In this case,
was that something you simulated or you designed, or did that happen naturally by these people?
Well, that happened when we got called in, right?
Okay,
and so,
because some of these trainings simulate things, and they try and
give me some great ideas for simulations. This is awesome.
Wow,
we should put it in an octagonal ring. That could work pretty well.
So clearly they needed help. They needed your help.
Yeah, needed some help.
Yeah.
And in that case, what was happening was they had extreme versions of mental toughness, an extreme preference towards the way in which they might have been tough on people. They were highly risk-taking. They were very low on emotional control, clearly, right? So you start to see extreme variability in the way in which people behave. And so what we're trying to do is to bring that awareness to people, firstly. What is your natural style? Because as you and I know, when you introduce stress, right, into people's lives, they revert to their natural style of behavior, right? So if you are naturally somebody who doesn't necessarily have a strong ability to manage their emotions, put you into a stressful situation, you might explode.
Yeah.
Right? And so, if you have that awareness that you do that, and if you ever watch the movie Bad Boys, all right, Martin Lawrence in Bad Boys 2 does this thing called woozah, where he touches his earlobe, and that anchors him to remind himself that he needs to calm down.
Yeah.
Right? And there are lots of techniques that you can use to kind of help you to do that.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah. So just about the risk reward, I was talking to an entrepreneur this week, and he kind of said that in this environment, in this economy, that the reward isn't there as much for the risk that people take. Can you relate to that, or is that true, or is that different than careers?
Yeah, it's a real challenge. I think the reward is now starting to look a little bit different.
Okay.
Right? And so sometimes if we're judging reward by the old parameters that we might have had, from 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, or 2 years ago, it's probably quite different to what it is now.
Okay.
I was talking to a CEO 2 days ago, and he was mentioning that actually he's so frustrated with everyone talking about this post-COVID world and what do our goals and outcomes need to be there. You know what? We are in post-COVID. This is it. I can manage this, and this is what I'm going to focus on.
Yeah.
Right? And he was going back to that, controlling the controllables as a way of managing his own reward system. Right? These are the risks I'm going to take. This is what I understand are the current situations, and this is the reward that I'm expecting in the state that I know now.
Okay.
Right? And so I think we need to change the goalposts about what reward looks like. Yeah, absolutely.
It's good that I asked. Okay, final question, and we always ask this on Dubai Works, is about the reach in here and as an emerging market. Raj, you were here since 12 years ago, I think, before 2007? And then
2008,
2008, yes. And your business is in the UK and Australia, but also firmly in Dubai. What are the positives? Do you think that this region, the Middle East, can emerge in the same way that China has and the same way that India is emerging? Can the Middle East emerge as a market, as an economy? Can we see higher GDPs across the board? And if so, how long will it take?
Yeah, I wish I was an economist to work this out. Look, I'm just a psychologist. So look, I think if we, from my perspective,
and a business owner as well, who's a business
owner, absolutely. I think mindset tells you a lot, right? And I think where there's a will, there is a way. And my God, is there a will in the Middle East, right? And so if we're going to use that as a foundation of building on strength, most regions have been decimated, right, by what's been going on. If there's a will to rebuild and a concerted effort to do that, the rebuilding is going to move at accelerated pace, right? And I think we're starting to see that. And of course, China is starting to do that, and they're a single force. And in the Middle East, a lot of that is also happening, right? There is very much a single force in each of the countries that drives a lot of that change, right, in consultation with its relevant stakeholders. But also then we have the GCC, right? This cooperating council of countries that supports each other, to be able to do that. And so from that perspective, I talk to a lot of people who, are in different states, right, within, their own entrepreneurship journey. And for us, we just need to rethink and do things a little bit differently. And I think trying to go back to the ways of, how we might have measured success in the past is probably not going to be a good indication of what success is going to look like moving forward. There might be some metrics that are similar. It'd be very hard for me, Richard, to put a time frame on this, right? I think some industries, they're already out of it, right? Technology has already moved ahead. And so, they're well and truly thriving. We've seen online retail sales, companies 200-300% of their targets, right? Because they just didn't anticipate this, whereas footfall is kind of down, right? So, we're kind of seeing some different measures that now companies are needing to use to measure success or to deem success. And so I think that's different. But where there's a will, there is a way. And I think that part is fundamental to making sure that there is a unified approach to having the success, right? I think in a lot of the sort of Western developed economies, you see the fractional sort of mindset, right, around where people should go, whether it's in the US or in different countries in Europe. You've got these different, partisan type, conversations happening. And you don't necessarily have that so much in the Middle East, right? So that creates alignment, and therefore that creates a faster opportunity to move and to pivot. And that's what we've been seeing, a lot more of recently.
And that's probably what we need at the moment. Well, Raj, really nice to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time, and good to connect perfectly to Sydney. So hopefully we'll see you when you're back in Dubai in person.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you for your time. Love your work. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you, Raj. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, man.
Hey guys, I'm Richard Fitzgerald. This is Dubai Works, where we interview the business leaders making a difference in this great city.
That business with scalability was very interesting to me.
I like building something that has legacy.
That business with scalability was very interesting to me.
I like building something that has legacy.